the hard place. Like a wind from Goldland he sweeps by, blown far from his homeland in search of glory and honor. We walk in the garden of his turbulence.
Hello and welcome to Movie Joust. My name is Jesse Nussman, a film critic living here in Atlanta, Georgia. And with me on the other line, celebrating the dawn of a new year, welcoming back our two other co-hosts, Jason Evans and Josh Sewell. Guys, how's your holidays? Was it great? Was it magical? How many times did you watch Home Alone with the family?
Yeah, pretty well. If I can, not aside from the fact that it's my turn for whatever plague swept through my household last week.
So you did catch the Nosferatu plague, as we joked about on the last episode.
Yeah. It was my turn. I picked my youngest daughter up from school today. It was her first day back, and I was like, "How's your day?" She said, "You sound funny like a cartoon mouse." I'm like, "That's your fault."
That's pretty good. I've been very lucky. So far I haven't gotten sick, but I'm sure it is just a matter of time. I will also say that, as folks may know, I work at CNN as a journalist, and the holidays are usually pretty quiet.
Not this year.
The news has been really happening lately.
Yeah.
Like New Year's Day was supposed to be like nothing was going on, and then this thing happened in New Orleans. Right. My past week has been
we got the presidential funeral. It's probably going to snow where we are, which the state of Georgia is not prepared for. So let's try and
Yeah, I have family in Washington D.C. I've got family all over the place, but my family in Washington's preparing for a big storm, and they were sort of like, "Oh yeah, we're preparing for about 6 inches up here. I think we'll be okay." And I'm like, "Oh, we're preparing for like a half an inch here, and we will not be all right."
It'll be totally Armageddon here. Well, assuming we do survive our winter Armageddon, why don't we take a look forward? It's a new year, new possibilities. We're going to kind of do a loosey-goosey preview episode on some of our most anticipated movies of the year. Movies we will hopefully talk about on this show. We don't really have a set methodology for doing this because, Hollywood really only makes kind of like a handful of different kinds of movies. You have like your auteur movies, and then you have big franchise blockbusters or horror movies. So let's just go around in a circle. Jason, why don't we start with you? Let's open up the booklet, give a little calendar recommendation for our viewers so they can circle and be looking forward to stuff. What's on your calendar?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and do mine. I've got like 4 that I'm really looking forward to this year, and I'm going to try and do them in alphabetical, not alphabetical order.
I meant organized.
Chronological order. That's what I meant. So in terms of which one comes out first through last, my first one that I'm really excited for comes out in early March. It is the new film from Bong Joon-ho, who of course gave us Parasite and Snowpiercer, which are like perhaps among like my 10 favorite movies of the past decade. Just 2 absolute awesome films. And sort of like Snowpiercer, this is going to be another sci-fi film. It's called Mickey 17. It stars Robert Pattinson. He plays what's known as an expendable, which is a worker, someone who works in space, like on colonization of new planets and such. They do really dangerous things. And when they die, because they die from doing this dangerous stuff, their body gets regenerated, like they get their mind gets copied into a new body, their consciousness goes into a new body. So he is Mickey number 17. I think I'm betting that we are going to get to see Mickey 1 through 16 die some pretty gruesome and horrible deaths, which could be really funny. This is supposed to be a black comedy, but apparently Mickey 17 survives unexpectedly, and Mickey 18 comes along and is like, I've got to replace you or something. I don't know what necessarily happens, but frankly, give me Bong Joon-ho doing some weird, trippy sci-fi any day of the year. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Do you think we're going to actually see it?
Yeah, it's
because
been
Warner Brothers
and
keeps like kicking it down the can, and
the funny thing.
Let us watch it.
The funny thing about it is, I feel like the early rumors were, it's a disaster. They're trying to push it off because it's just a nightmare and it doesn't work. And then suddenly the rumors started to come out that, oh, it's really good, and they're trying to find the right spot for it on the calendar. And they've settled on this early March date, which is sort of neither, like if it was truly unbelievable, they'd probably go for a May or a June. And if it was terrible, it would be a January or a September.
Well, I think the real answer here is this is Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah.
So when all else fails, blame Zaslav, right?
Yeah, it really truthfully, like, I know nothing really about like the behind the scenes of this movie, but just sort of like reading tea leaves as we like to do as film critics, it just sort of seems like Warner Brothers like gave Bong Joon-ho a big blank check, and Bong Joon-ho made a weird Bong Joon-ho movie. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, so I'm with you, Jason. Like, give me the candy. But then Warner Brothers is like, oh, we don't know quite how to market this, and maybe that's part of the issue. But their problem, not ours.
Yeah.
100%. I'm still in.
Yeah,
and weird Bong Joon-ho is still better than 99% of what you're going to get out there.
Or no Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah. Josh, what's the first one you have on your list?
So yeah, I think I'm going to preface mine by saying these aren't, not all of these are ones that I'm just like jumping up and down excited about as much as things that I'm curious about, like how is this going to work? And one of the first ones that's coming along, we don't have to wait too long. It's next month. It looks like the release date is February 21st for Oz Perkins' The Monkey. And so this is based on a Stephen King short story that has like traumatized my childhood brain because it's from that short story, that 80s short story collection Skeleton Crew, which has the creepy monkey on the cover. And so like even when I was too young to read the book, that picture of the monkey haunted my nightmares. So when I saw that they were gonna adapt it, I was curious. I don't know about excited, just because of the track record we have with Stephen King adaptations. For every Shining and Shawshank and insert classic here, you have 17 awful Children of the Corn sequels. And
so
this
wait, are you defaming Children of the Corn?
What?
Children of the Corn is bad, Jason.
I'm kidding, it's terrible, I know.
No, I was talking about Children of the Corn 17, Corn in Space, or whatever.
Oh yeah, there's so many like direct to DVD versions of that. I feel like the better question is like, Josh, are you a Longlegs person?
That is what I'm curious about, because I was with Longlegs for a good half of the movie, and that's when it kind of started falling apart for me. But I feel like if Perkins can bring kind of the dread of that first half of the movie and avoid where it kind of went off the rails in the second. But I feel like a movie like this allows you to embrace the campiness a little more, if that's what he's going for. Because the story is your basic, horror story premise, which is, move into a new house, find a creepy monkey toy, people start dying. And, is it the monkey or is it something more explainable? But I think when you're going for something as explicitly supernatural as this, it allows you to get crazy in ways that maybe didn't work as well in Longlegs.
I will say Osgood Perkins has released, I want to say it was like a 5-minute clip or so from the movie, like a not a scene, but a couple sort of mini scenes that lead up to a certain character apparently dying. I mean, like it literally, the scene cuts with this character like fractions of a second from gruesome death. It seems pretty certain. And it had that sense of doom and dread that I agree with you, Josh, was so good in Longlegs. And so I'm very interested in this. I'm not a big horror guy. But
Same.
Yeah, but I think Osgood Perkins is someone who's doing some really interesting things in that space. And I'm interested in seeing where he goes next. So I'm with you on it. This one's one to look forward to.
So I'm going to keep the horror vibes going. The first one I'm going to throw out is 28 Years Later, which has a trailer out now. I think one of the more effective trailers I've seen in a while, in just sort of like a movie that when it was announced, I was like, Okay. I guess that makes sense in our reboot era. And then saw that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland and presumably Cillian Murphy were going to be back involved in it again. And was like, all right, now I'm really interested because Garland and Boyle do not seem like guys who typically, Boyle's only sequel is Trainspotting 2, which is, whatever you think about it, a weird sequel to the movie Trainspotting. And so my expectations are whatever this is going to be, they clearly have an idea of what they want to return to this series to say. And then I saw the trailer and was just like, I will pay $200 to see this tonight. Like, and I don't know if this is the millennial in me talking, if we've just reached the point where just like my nostalgia is being just regurgitated back towards me because like the first 28 days later, the Danny Boyle, Alex Garland zombie movie just like scared the living shit out of me when I was a teenager. Like, I thought it was one of the scariest things I'd ever seen. It's probably even creepier now to revisit post-pandemic. But yeah. I'm excited to see like what in the world that they have up their sleeves with this new movie. That also has a really great cast too. I mean, like Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, Ralph Fiennes playing like what looks like a weird bloodied doctor with a skull fetish. It just sort of like I'm fully on board for like whatever craziness this movie is going to be.
I mean, my feeling very much echoes yours, Jesse, which is that Alex Garland and Danny Boyle don't need to do this. They are both very, very successful writer-directors who could make, I don't want to say they can make anything they want, but they have a lot of latitude.
And they could just as easily just get a producer credit on, like they could do the like
Exactly.
Steven Spielberg gets money every time there's a Jurassic World movie coming out, but he's not interested in making those anymore. Yeah,
exactly. And the fact that they are returning to this, I agree with you, says to me that they've got something to say. And these are two pretty smart people when it comes to like sci-fi.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited, and I agree with you. The cast is really strong. It feels to me like the kind of thing where they had a really good idea for a script, and some pretty good actors and actresses went. I mean, Jodie Comer. I mean, this is some quality cast. You're going to get some good acting here. I'm very excited for this.
And this is they've already announced this is like part one of a trilogy, right?
I believe so. I forget who is doing the follow-up, which is apparently, if we want to look 2 years ahead, is going to come out in 2026. Nia DaCosta, I think, is who got announced for it. But I guess like, but I guess like Boyle and Garland have sort of plotted out like what the next several movies in this series are going to be. So
that's where they get their blank check producer credits.
Right, exactly. All right, Jason, what's going to be your second pick?
Well, chronologically, you get to July on my calendar, and Superman. This may be a super obvious choice. I mean, if you were going to ask me to pick the biggest box office film of the year, this would certainly be a strong contender for it. I'm on board, and I love comic book movies. I'm on the record as saying that I'm a big fan of Marvel and DC and all that stuff. And so, again, this may seem like an obvious pick, but I'm really here because of James Gunn, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy, all three of those films, and is someone who clearly has something interesting to say about the comic book world. He's made TV series, he's made other movies, and he's been given, I don't know why I'm doing all Warner Brothers movies. I don't mean to be doing that, but
it's almost like you work for that company.
Yeah, full disclaimer. Yes, I do work for a Warner Brothers Discovery. CNN is one of the many offshoots of the Warner Brothers Discovery empire. I am not a fan of David Zaslav, by the way, Josh.
Damn, you
not at all.
better be careful where you say that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully he's not listening to this podcast. But for Zaslav, for Warner Brothers to give James Gunn complete control of the DC universe. Basically, everything DC has done in the past, they're like, toss it all out. James Gunn and his producing partner, Peter Safran, you guys are now in charge. And this film is what James Gunn, who tells great stories in the superhero world, The Guardians of the Galaxy films are fabulous and had a full arc in those 3 movies. For this to be his film that is going to start everything he's doing in the DC universe, I'm absolutely on board. I love the casting. David Corenswet is in the tradition of Superman being someone who's not really well known.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we get here in David Corenswet. But then Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, I've loved her since Miss Maisel. And Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. Nicholas Hoult, we've talked about him a lot on this podcast lately. No one is having a better 18 months or so than Nicholas Hoult.
Right.
So, I think that's great casting. It's just, it looks like it's going to be really interesting. And come on, Crypto? The trailer basically is, hey, everybody, you're going to love Crypto the Superdog. Okay.
Yeah, I'm way more open to the James Gunn take on Superman, which seems to be he has a super dog and he fights octopus monsters and he wants to kiss the girl at work versus the Zack Snyder Henry Cavill take, which was what if every time Superman fought someone 9/11 happened all over again? And I was like, this is the most pretentious thing I've ever seen.
Hey, don't put that on Henry Cavill. I think put that on Zack Snyder.
Yeah. And,
who, by the way, well,
really
really quick, if I can.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think Zack Snyder doesn't like superheroes. Mm-hmm. A lot of what he was trying to do was, here's why superheroes are bad.
Yeah.
James Gunn is the opposite. James Gunn loves superheroes.
Well, and also when was the last time there was a good Superman movie? Is it Superman 2, the second Christopher Reeve one? This movie does also have an opportunity to be it's been a really long time. As much as there is superhero burnout, I feel there is a bit of optimism that I have of it's been a while since we've had a really great or just a fun, satisfying Superman movie.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I'll let Josh get in, but just to answer, I'll say the first half of Man of Steel was good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I was going to say, I think the most successful incarnations of the character over the last couple of decades have been on TV, whether it's the animated version where Tim Daly was Superman, or I didn't watch the show, but the clips I've seen of the CW Superman and Lois, the Tyler, is it Hoechlin version of the character, seems like they really understood, what's good about the character, but
I like the first 3 or 4 seasons of Smallville.
Yeah,
I eventually gave up on it, but I like the first few seasons. Yeah,
but I mean, if you can take somebody as completely square as Captain America and make him relevant for our era, it feels like Superman's a no-brainer, And so I'm really looking forward to this one as well.
Okay, what's your next pick, Josh?
So my next one, if we're going chronologically, is The Life of Chuck, which is scheduled to come out in May, which is based on Stephen King short story, and it is from Mike Flanagan, who speaking of awful Stephen King adaptations, he seems to be the filmmaker who just inherently understands what makes King's work good. He turned Dr. Sleep into a great movie that had no business being a good movie.
Agreed.
He's got the rights to the Dark Tower, knock on wood. We'll see if that happens.
Oh my God, that's never happening, Josh.
I know.
that probably just needs to stay as a book. That's probably we need to understand that's best as a book.
But speaking of, between Dr. Sleep, The Life of Chuck is a novella from King's recent collection, If It Bleeds. And when I read that story, I was like, this is a really fascinating story that will never be a movie. Because there's no way you can turn this into a movie. And then I heard Life of Chuck being made into a movie with Tom Hiddleston. And I was like, no, you can't do it. And they were like, Mike Flanagan. I was like, apparently he's done it again. Because it sounded ridiculous. But, it hit the festival circuit last fall. Got rave reviews. And I think Neon bought it, if I'm not mistaken. And
that sounds right.
They shelved it because they already had their hands full this award season with Anora and a couple of other potential awards winners. So they're kind of waiting a few months to release this one so it can play in the next award season. but everything I've heard about this film so far makes me believe like he's once again made this work when it shouldn't have worked. So I am very, very. This might be one of my most anticipated.
I haven't read this King story. Is it horror King, or is it more kind of like the Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption?
It's not horror. It's not full blown coming of age kind of human drama. It's somewhere in another genre that I don't want to go too far into.
Understandable.
Because I think a lot of the surprises, it's not like, oh my god, Bruce Willis was dead the whole time or whatever, but like, but a lot of what makes the story work emotionally is once you figure out what it's doing and how it's doing it. Now, how that's going to play out visually instead of on the page, I have no idea.
Hey, I want to do a Stephen King thing really quick. There is, we're talking about all these different adaptations, and there's sort of no author that sells his stuff off for movies more readily than Stephen King. There is. Do you guys have a Stephen King book or short story that you're like, that must be made into a movie? Because I'm going to tell you, one of my favorite books of all time is this film called is this book called Eyes of the Dragon that Stephen King wrote. That is about two young princes who are brothers, and one of them sort of gets sent away and the other one becomes king. And I don't want to get into the whole story of it, but basically what happened, Stephen King wrote it a long time ago when he was, just doing nothing but horror. And one of his kids said to him, "Hey, Daddy, will you read a story to me that you've written?" And he realized he couldn't read any of his horror movies, any of his horror books to his kids because they were too scary. So he wrote Eyes of the Dragon as something that would be a little more kid-friendly. It's not like small kid-friendly. It's all, fantasy and swords and sorcery kind of stuff. It's such a great book. And I've been literally waiting 20-plus years for them to make it into a movie. I wish it would happen.
I have no idea why HBO or Netflix hasn't jumped on that, especially in the post-Game of Thrones era. It seems
oh
like
my God, it's such an obvious choice.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
All right. Well, suppose it's my turn now. By the way, my King adaptation would be to just adapt his book on writing, but us do it in the style of Swimming to Cambodia, where Stephen King just recites the whole thing at a desk the entire time.
There you go, yeah. Well, he does the audiobook, so that's pretty
exactly,
close.
exactly. So my next pick is Mission Impossible 8. Or I believe it is called Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. The title of it has changed a bunch of times, but I'm just gonna call it Mission Impossible 8. Guys, I'm gonna drop a hot take here. I think Mission Impossible is the best movie franchise. There's only one Mission Impossible movie I think is not very good. The rest absolutely slap. And I'm gonna miss seeing Tom Cruise as our modern day Evel Knievel, even though I'm curious to see like what in the world is this guy gonna do with Alejandro Iñárritu in 2 years. But yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I don't really have a complicated relationship with or reason for liking it other than just like Tom Cruise doing like crazy jackass stunts is just like the purest form of movie magic to me. And every time I go and see one of these movies, I always like want to run circles around the parking lot. And I'm just, this is to me like my like ideal version of what I want out of a blockbuster is like these movies don't take themselves that seriously, but also they're not like so winking and smarmy and snarking that I like don't care what happens to the characters. And they're made by people who are like, you know what, if we have to just make franchise entertainment at this point, let's make this the like, let's do stuff that like no one is gonna dare try and like copy what we do, and Tom Cruise will like jump off a moving train or something like that. So, are you guys with me? Are you here to see the magnificent end of Ethan Hunt?
Oh, 110%, and I'm mostly on board because I have absolute faith that after the last one, I thought Dead Reckoning or 7 Dead Reckoning, whatever you want to call it, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. To me, it had great stunts. It had some interesting things it set up. but it lagged at times, and it ended poorly.
It definitely
I thought.
felt like a part one of
Yeah.
what meant to be a larger story.
Yeah, that's
I
where
have
I'm at too.
complete and absolute faith in Christopher McQuarrie, the writer director, to course correct, so to speak, and land this plane. Because frankly, dude wrote Edge of Tomorrow. He wrote The Usual Suspects. He wrote Rogue Nation. He wrote Fallout. He wrote Top Gun Maverick. He directed Mission Impossible Fallout. He directed Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Christopher McQuarrie is a really, really good writer.
He's basically become the Tom Cruise whisperer at this point.
Yes, he gets it. And he's also a pretty damn good director. And I absolutely have faith in the two of them to do right by this franchise. I agree with you. It's excellent, Jesse. I'm not sure that I think it's like the greatest of all time, but it's in the running, and they're going to land the plane and finish off Ethan Hunt with what he deserves, which is a great, probably spectacular stunt-filled ending to his career.
Yeah,
Josh, are you gonna cry when Ethan Hunt dies?
I think they're going to pull a Top Gun Maverick. I don't think they're going to kill him. I think Tom Cruise, they set, just like in Top Gun, they set him up to die. If you follow every action movie trope and cliche, they're setting him up to die and hand off the reins to Miles Teller and Glenn Powell. And he's like, no, I'm still the king. It's still going to be me. Like, I don't see them killing Ethan Hunt. I'll be happy to eat my words, but especially when I'm kind of in the same boat as Jason, where to me, the 7 was probably my least favorite since the second one, but a lot of the issues I have with it could easily be attributed to the fact that it's a COVID movie. Like a lot of hurdles and roadblocks they ran into were probably to do with that. Now that they've spent, as much as the gross national product of a small country on this last movie, what is it, like $300 or $400 million now?
It's an insane amount of money.
I feel like a lot of that is them essentially, like you said, just like resetting the last movie. So my prediction is that this is both going to be a sequel and semi-remake to the last film. I feel like it's going to be a lot of Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise going, yeah, we know that part sucked. Here's how we're going to fix it.
What if Ethan Hunt dies, but at the very end we see Simon Pegg and Rebecca Ferguson, and they're like, no one gave more than he did, and then the camera zooms out, and the Washington Monument has now just been replaced with a giant statue of Tom Cruise.
Yeah, it's like Cruise Rushmore.
All right, Jason, what's your third pick?
So November 7th gives us Bugonia, which is Yorgos Lanthimos' latest film. He, of course, is from the favorite Poor Things, Kinds of Kindness, which probably no one listening to this podcast saw, but which I thought had some really, really fine moments.
Fun movie.
He is back. Yorgos is back with Emma Stone, who has become his muse. I mean, the two of them are joined at the hip at this point, I think. And Jesse Plemons, who was really great in Kinds of Kindness. So Yorgos likes to work with people that he knows, and he always seems to do best with people that he knows. So yes, please. And it's supposed to be like a sci-fi comedy about two conspiracy theorists who kidnap the son of the CEO of a pharmaceutical company.
Not at all relevant to stuff that's going on in the actual world right now.
Yeah, exactly. Ripped from the headlines a little bit, maybe. But I think, to me, the running theme that I'm sensing from all three of us, as much as we love Tom Cruise, as much as we love other big actors, it's the director, it's the writer-director that attracts us to a project more than anything else. Like, when we're doing this preview, we're going to skip over plenty of stuff with big-name Hollywood stars in it. But the big directors, that's what's attracting us. And Yorgos Lanthimos, big director. Dude who, like, every film is a banger. Even Kinds of Kindness that was a little bit too long and, maybe a little bit misguided. So, Yorgos and Emma together, forget about it. Every single time I'm there, because their track record from The Favorite and Poor Things is enough that I'm on board.
All right, Josh, what is your third pick?
So my third pick is Edgar Wright's version of The Running Man, which is an adaptation of a novel from Richard Bachman, who I think most people know is actually Stephen King. So if in case you
Josh,
haven't-
we need to get some new reading.
yeah, if you haven't picked up on my bit yet that I've been doing for the whole show, we talk about how Stephen King is one of the most adapted authors, probably because, you know, he's also arguably the most famous author on the planet. Even if you don't read his books, you know who he is. But he is also one of the authors with possibly the worst track record of adaptations. Like we were saying earlier, for every great King adaptation, you get a ton of terrible ones. And I think 2025 is going to show us that when put in the hands of the right storytellers who understand what makes his books work, you've got a chance to really get a resurgence of some of his best materials. I think what Mike Flanagan understands about King's work is the scary stuff doesn't matter if you don't care about the people it's happening to. And
That's a great point.
Yeah.
where that really comes in effect with The Running Man is the fact that it is, you know, if you've read the original book, which he wrote, like I said, under the pen name Richard Bachman, before that got blown up and everybody realized who it actually was. That's where he wrote his more sort of darker sci-fi, more dystopian kind of stories. And it is not the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, right? You know, which was pure, it's fun, don't get me wrong, it's pure 80s cheese, but it's
I've actually
nothing
never
like the
seen
book.
it.
Yeah, it's
Oh, really?
it's a lot
Yeah,
of fun.
it's a blind spot. I've never cool because
Wow.
I feel like
It's
I've
not
always
great.
heard it's like silly and like
It-
people who like the book didn't like the movie, so
Oh, yeah,
I never actually got around to it. Seeing
It's-
it.
No,
a lot
wait.
of fun.
Jesse, you need to see it because it's crazy campiness. It's absurd. Jesse Ventura is like just so there's so many weird.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many weird. And the
I
problem
will
is
definitely see it before the Glenn Powell one comes
Yeah,
out.
there's an opera singing gladiator assassin.
it's just
that's
so
what you
crazy.
get.
The problem is
I'm
Jesse,
sold.
you won't connect with Richard Dawson, who plays a game show host in it, and Richard
Mhm.
Dawson is like the classic greatest game show host, maybe like alongside Bob Barker of all time. But he's before your time. You got to see the original Running Man, but Josh, I'm with you.
Yeah,
It's one that can be remade in a more interesting fashion because the 80s one is just so campy.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about the book is, you know, it's a futuristic novel set in an age before we knew what the future was going to look like. So this is he's essentially inventing reality shows before there were reality shows. He's inventing, you know, in the book, whereas the 80s version everything takes place on like a pretty small set because of the budget of the film. The book itself is you have the free reign of America to run. And so there's like bounty hunters. The people watching the show can call in and they get some of the reward if they help catch them. So you've got like 300 million people trying to find you. And he's doing this to feed his starving family. His kid's sick and he needs money for medicine. So the stakes are much more realistic. I think Glenn Powell, as, you know, compared to Arnold, is much more of an everyman main character. You know, not every man looks like Glenn Powell, but, you know, he's
I wish.
stature-wise more of a realistic protagonist, you know. But I think what I'm most excited about is that this is the new Edgar Wright movie. And so his track record for me, it's kind of like you with Mission Impossible. I think he's made one movie I didn't like, and that was just
I would agree.
with Last Night in Soho, right?
Mhm.
And so he's back with his writing partner from Scott Pilgrim. This I think is going to be a much darker movie than Scott Pilgrim was. But even with Wright's more troubling stuff, he still has that unique brand of humor that he brings to it. So I'm really, really interested to see what an Edgar Wright Stephen King mashup looks like.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that too. No, nothing to add other than sounds like a perfect melding of like star, material, and director.
I will say about Edgar Wright, I've been bummed. I mean, he made Baby Driver in 2017. I thought Baby Driver was easily one of the best films of that year, and just such a super enjoyable time at the movies. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait. I mean, and obviously I've enjoyed his other stuff that came before that. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. And honestly, I mean, it's been a while. And Last Night in Soho, which had moments, was a disappointment. So I'm like, can we get, let's get a Scott Pilgrim, a Hot Fuzz, a Shaun of the Dead, a Baby Driver guy back in the chair for the Running Man. I'm super excited for this one. Josh, of all the ones you mentioned, this is the one I think I'm most excited about because, again, I'm a slave to director, and I think Edgar Wright is great, but it's just been a while since we've seen anything from him.
So my third pick, I'm going to continue with this director focus mindset that we're in. I'm going to pick a movie called Die, My Love, which stars Jennifer Lawrence, Robert Pattinson, and Lakeith Stanfield. And it is directed by Lynn Ramsay, who, if anyone doesn't know, she's a Scottish filmmaker who I feel like is still kind of underrated. Like, she's only made kind of a handful of movies at this point. They're all really good, I think. But she has such a unique, singular, like very visceral style to her films and is she's someone that has like a bit of a reputation of being a kind of like ultra perfectionist on set, which, if she was a male director, I feel like people would be praising her for. But because of sexism in the industry, I guess that means that usually like she gets attached to the projects and then they don't quite pan out. But seeing her do a project with those three stars that I mentioned, I'm just really excited to see what that is. I don't know what you guys' relationship is to Lynn Ramsay, but I think she's someone that like still is so exciting, and I never really know what to expect with her films. And even still, I feel like she is not crested as a filmmaker. I feel like she still has potentially like her best film in her back pocket, and seeing her do what just sounds like a crazy love triangle story between those three actors, count me in. I'm sure it'll be like one of the more unique movie-going experiences of the next 12 months.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's I haven't loved everything she's done, but she's, like you said, she's got a very unique, distinct voice that even if she's tackling genre stuff like the Joaquin Phoenix movie that she did, she's doing it in a way that is commenting on the genre and not just saying like, look how well I can do it.
She's really good at like putting you in the headspace of characters, and her movies can be very like kaleidoscopic and kind of assaulting on your senses, but it does such a great job as like putting you in the mindset of the person you are watching and have you feel like you're in that person's shoes for 2 hours.
Well, and Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is an actress who takes some really interesting projects. Mm-hmm. And I'm intrigued to see. From what I've heard, she's been very personally involved in this one, so I'm interested in seeing what she and Lynn Ramsay do together.
All right, Jason, what's your final pick for us?
So I think we've reached the point where you cannot have a Christmas without Timothée Chalamet doing something interesting that everyone wants to go see at the theaters. And so next Christmas time, we will have Marty Supreme from filmmaker Josh Safdie, who's one of the two Safdie brothers. They made Uncut Gems together. They've sort of broken apart at this point, and I think we're all sort of wondering which one of them is one of them a genius and the other one not. That kind of,
or like
situation.
Which one's the funny one, and like which, like, that's been the funny thing of like as the Coen brothers have split up is like, for whatever you thought of the Driveway Dolls last year, it was like, oh, Ethan is the funny one of the two.
So in any event, I'm excited for this film because I'm really interested in Josh Safdie. I thought that, maybe I'm wrong, I thought that Josh mostly wanted to be an actor and that his brother was going to be mostly the director, but
that's
Josh
Benny.
Benny wants to be the actor. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
So
he's the guy from Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Oppenheimer. So yeah.
that's right. Yes, yes. So Josh is directing this film. It's about a table tennis star, a guy named Marty Reisman from the 1950s and 60s. That's who Timothy Chalamet will be playing. Gwyneth Paltrow is also in this film. We saw this past year, just weeks ago, that Timothy Chalamet can sing. I want to see if he can also play ping pong.
I think the important question here is, will we see Forrest Gump in this movie?
Right, exactly.
I've heard didn't Chalamet like say in an interview recently, like described this movie as basically like a cross between Catch Me If You Can and The Wolf of Wall Street? Like basically said it's a like very manic Scorsese-esque comedy.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, even though it's about this ping pong star, it's not like a sports biopic. Apparently, a lot of it's going to be fiction. A lot of it's just going to be like crazy out there kind of stuff. I just feel like Christmas time has become Timothy Chalamet time, and I'm fine for his latest attempt to rule Christmas the way he did this year with The Complete Unknown and last year with Wonka.
Yeah, please just like inject this movie into my bloodstream right now as someone who is just like so perfectly like on the Safdie's wavelength, and their mode of like chaotic manic energy is just I don't know, really speaks to the little dirtbag inside me. Josh, what's going to be your final pick?
So my last one is a Stephen King adaptation. No, I'm just kidding. I think we've run that bit into the ground. No, this one is just sheer curiosity for me, and that's, it's going to be Wicked Part 2, or Wicked for Good now. Mainly because I was a doubter with the first one. I was like, you're making a Part 1 that is just as long, if not longer, than the entire musical that you're adapting. What are you adding? What are you doing? And John Chu and Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, they proved me wrong. That's a really, really great film. And I'm curious to see what happens when they have to adapt the shorter second half that I think even most fans would say is a bit anticlimactic because it doesn't have the high highs and the low lows of the first half. There are a couple of solid songs in Act 2, but most people will tell you that most of the beloved songs are in Part 1. And so, from what I've heard, they're bringing in new songs. They're doing a lot of sort of... That this is going to be much more of an adaptation than the first one was. Where, like, the Act 1, Part 1 gave the story room to breathe a little bit. Act 2 of the play, or the musical, is like 55 minutes. So I think that gives them a lot of room to sort of like color outside the lines, but that also gives them like a lot of rope to hang themselves. So I want to see, like, do they trip and fall at the finish line, or do they actually pull this thing off?
I'm really on board for this film because I agree with you. I think that the first part was outstanding, and all the stuff that they added, all the ways they let it breathe, really, really worked. Which I was quite skeptical. I'm with you. I was quite skeptical, and really enjoyed it. And I think that the cast was just outstanding. I mean, I'm looking forward to. We're going to get more Jeff Goldblum in this part, in Part 2 than we did in Part 1. And yeah, I've seen the play, and I agree that the second half of it isn't quite as good as the first half. I think partly because in the first half we're sort of marveling at the Wicked Witch not being the bad guy. We're just so used to that character being the bad guy. But my bet is I'm at the point where I'm going to trust John Chu. Really good track record. Look, we just keep on going back to director.
Yeah.
But I'm going to trust John Chu, and I think this has potential to be perhaps the biggest movie of the year if it's any good.
So for my final pick, I'm gonna crack my knuckles a little bit and move some space around in the room, because it's time for me to talk about my favorite filmmaker, my Lord and Savior, Mr. Paul Thomas Anderson, who has a new movie coming out this summer that is allegedly the biggest movie he's ever made.
In terms of budget.
In terms of budget. And I don't really know anything about it other than it stars Leonardo DiCaprio and also has Regina Hall and Benicio del Toro and Sean Penn, I believe. And I've heard it is possibly a modern day update on the Thomas Pynchon novel Vineland, which Paul Thomas Anderson has made a great movie out of a Thomas Pynchon book before in Inherent Vice. Who knows if that's true? I really don't care. I'm fully signed me up for anything that Paul Thomas Anderson wants to do, and if he's somehow tricked David Zaslav and all those at Warner Brothers to somehow give him a massive budget to do a weird Thomas Pynchon movie with Leonardo DiCaprio that maybe is a MAGA satire, maybe not. Sounds like movie of the year to me. Just sign me up. Take me to church, Paul.
I mean, look, he's one of the great directors around right now. By the way, you know who else is in it? Is Alana Haim, who was
that's right.
Yes, who was in what you call Licorice Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
She was great in Licorice Pizza. I'm super excited to see her back with him again. PTA just makes, even if you don't love his movies, like I didn't love The Master, but I appreciated what I was watching. Hey, I'm just gonna say, I mean, like what you saw in film was great, even if it wasn't the most entertaining movie.
Sure.
And frankly, Boogie Nights is, I don't know, top 5, top 10 all time for me. So
one of those rare movies that like will have me in tears laughing every time it's on TV or streaming.
Yeah, that's one of those movies that it drives my wife crazy because every time it's on cable and I come across it, I'm like, okay, we're locked in for the next 2 hours. She's like, God damn, I've seen this 10 times. I'm like, number 11 coming up. Anything PTA does, you have to go see.
Yeah, I lean more towards Jason's. Like, a lot of his movies I respect more than outright love. But I mean, Licorice Pizza was my number 1 of that year. And, dude gets a free pass for There Will Be Blood, even if I didn't love Inherent Vice, And so, if his name's on it, I'm like you, my butt's in a seat. Even if I don't like the movie, you got to be there for the spectacle or the curiosity of it all.
All right. Well, before we wrap up,
should we do the big movie that we're most dreading or something like that?
Sure. What's the big movie you're most dreading? And then I'm gonna try and read through this text message I sent you guys as fast as I can as we close out and the outro music plays. But Jason, were you gonna suggest the Daily Wire's remake of Snow White to go after woke Disney? Is that the movie you're most dreading this year?
No, the movie I'm most dreading is Jurassic World Rebirth. Oof. Because frankly, I don't think there's been a good Jurassic movie in a long, long time, and I'm completely skeptical that these people have any idea how to. The last Jurassic World Park, whatever you want to call it, movie was an abomination. It was
yeah, it was.
It was terrible. It had no logic to it. I didn't care about anything that was going on.
Was that the bug one?
Yes.
With the dinosaur bugs.
Yes. Yes. Everything about it was
grasshoppers,
stupid.
yeah.
And yet, like, I can't decide if the recent Jurassic movies or the entire Transformers series are what give me hives more. Like,
well,
in both those cases, they keep on making terrible movies where it's clear everyone is just cashing a check, including the studio, and the American public goes and watches them. People, please stop.
People love dinosaurs.
I will see your Jurassic Park Transformers rant and raise you 2 more live-action remakes. We're getting Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. So both, those are 2 of my favorite animated movies of all time, neither of which scream, we need to do this again. They're fine.
Well, and Josh,
they're great the way they are.
Josh, especially because part of what's great about both those movies is the animated, fictional, mythical animals, Lilo and the dragons. How are you going to make a realistic? I don't understand. What's the point of doing it where you're still going to have an animated version of Lilo and of the Dragons. Like, what are you doing?
Both of those feature Chris Sanders, who proved to us just a few months ago, animation's still great with the Wild Robot. Like, it's just like you said with Jurassic Park and Transformers. This just seems like, how can we sell more lunchboxes? How can we sell more toys? I would love to eat my words. I would, because, most of Disney's live action remakes have been trash, but every once in a while you get a Peach Dragon or something. So I'd love to be wrong, but nothing I've seen about these movies so far fills me with optimism.
Trying to think of what I would pick. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the cultural discourse around the Michael Jackson biopic. And obviously there's
so that Michael Jackson pick, is that like approved by his estate? I believe it is.
It sure is. You think that thing's getting made without?
Yeah, his nephew plays Michael Jackson. Yeah. So how can you possibly begin to make an honest film about someone as complicated and potentially deeply, deeply flawed as Michael Jackson?
By ending it in 1988.
Yeah. And then Michael sold this many records. No, I mean, the one that I might put down that I'm going to be honest with you guys, there's no way in hell you guys are going to convince me to go see this, and I will drag my feet making this a bit for months and months. I don't believe this is a real movie at all. Apparently there is a Minecraft movie with Jason Momoa that is coming out in the spring.
Oh, God.
So Jumanji wasn't enough. He's got to do another video game movie.
Yeah. I don't think you guys are gonna convince me to see that. Maybe I'll go see the Jurassic World movie because Gareth Edwards is making that. But no bad movies this year. That's gonna be my New Year's goal.
Video game to movie adaptations. Do they have like is their batting average above like 100, like 10%? I don't think so. Is it above 5%? Probably.
Is there
not.
even a good one? Does Wreck-It Ralph count?
Yeah.
No. That's not. No, because that.
Edge of Tomorrow, but it's not really an actual video game. But it's still
that's not a video game at all.
That's the movie that best like approximates like what it's like to play a video game. Yeah. I don't know. That's a question for us to answer later, maybe. I'm just gonna rapid fire for our listeners. There's still so much, guys. Spike and Denzel are back together. Ari Aster's possibly making a COVID satire. We got Megan 2, 2 Soderbergh movies, 2 Frankenstein movies, a whole other Safdie movie with The Rock that we didn't even talk about. New Coogler, new Baumbach, and who could forget Big Dick Jim himself, James Cameron, taking us back to Pandora. Will we all be eating our words again as Avatar Fire and Ash becomes the new highest grossing movie ever? And I guess we're just going to find out.
Perhaps the biggest WTF I'm seeing this of all, Trey Parker, Matt Stone, Kendrick Lamar musical.
Oh, that's right. You know what? That's at the top. That's at the top.
Book of Mormon. Those dudes.
I mean, the South Park movie, those guys know how to write like really catchy earworm songs, and yeah, that's really just sort of like the yin and yang of like my college personality is like South Park and Kendrick Lamar just like forging together for one being. Yeah, well, it's going to be an exciting year on here. I think we're also going to do a new kind of episode segment where we're each going to really put the joust in a movie joust, and we're going to argue about some of our favorite unloved movies. How are you guys feeling about that? You excited?
Excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.